So it's official. The WBC have approved and sanctioned a fight between their light heavyweight champion Adonis Stevenson and their former super middleweight champion Badou Jack. And I'm going to quote the WBC president Mauricio Sulaiman right now. He said, "Champion Adonis Stevenson will fight former WBC super middleweight champion Badou Jack in a highly anticipated match. Mandatory challenger Alida Alvarez will fight Alexander Vodcek for the WBC interim title due to the fact that the mandatory defense has been delayed for several reasons. Both winners must fight immediately after their matches." So those are the words of Mauricio Sulaiman. Now I'll talk about the Alida Alvarez Alexander Vodcek fight in a separate video and the whole situation with Alida Alvarez having to jump through hoops basically to get a title shot. I'll cover that in a separate video, but in this video, I'm going to talk about this match between Stevenson and Badou Jack. Now, if you're talking about a prime Adonis Stevenson when he was maybe 35 years old, 34, 35, I would confidently pick him to beat Badou Jack. I think Badou Jack is an excellent fighter. He's one of the most improved fighters in boxing. And actually, when I did my annual awards video, I should have included Badou Jack in the category of most improved fighter, because Badou Jack has been tremendously improved over the past few years, including this year. However, he is quite a basic fighter. He does the basics very, very well. He has a very good defense, you know, decent power, very physically strong, very big, good jab, good punch selection, just a good all-round, solid, world-level pro, but with no real special effects. I think Adonis Stevenson is a more dynamic fighter. He's certainly a more dynamic puncher, and I think he's more formidable at long range. But Stevenson has lost his step over the past few years. He's 40 years old now. He's been fighting a pretty low level of opposition, and he's been inactive. Badou Jack, on the other hand, has been fighting a very high level of opposition, and he's been much more active. He's beat the likes recently of George Groves, Lucian Boutte, and James DeGale, where he had a draw with DeGale. A lot of people felt like he won the fight. So he's been fighting a very high level of opposition, and Adonis Stevenson hasn't. The momentum is definitely with Badou Jack. The way I see this fight potentially playing out, if Badou Jack wins the fight, I think it'll either be on points or possibly a late stoppage. But I lean more towards points if Badou Jack wins. I think the longer the fight goes, the better it's going to be for Badou Jack, because of the fact that he's been going long in fights recently, and he's been doing so with a high quality of opposition, and he's the younger guy. So I think the longer it goes, the better it is for Jack. Adonis Stevenson, I think if he's going to win the fight, his best bet is to get Badou Jack out of there early. And Badou Jack can sometimes be a little bit of a slow starter for the first round or two. We saw that against James DeGale. When they fought, James DeGale was able to drop him with a left hand. And we know Stevenson's left hand is probably the best in the business at this point in boxing. Badou Jack was also knocked out earlier on in his career by Derek Edwards in the first round. So he's vulnerable early. And Stevenson, as we know, is dangerous early. We saw what he did to, well, many fighters over the years. Chad Dawson, Andre Fonfara recently, Thomas Williams Jr. You know, he's dangerous early in fights, Adonis Stevenson. And even though he's an old man, he's still got the equalizer, like Edward Woodward. Shout out to the old school people who know about the Equalizer TV program. Yeah, Adonis Stevenson still got the equalizer with the left hand. And that's what I think his best bet is. Try and get Badou Jack out of there within the first 4 or 5 rounds. After that, I think Badou Jack is going to get stronger. He's going to build momentum, and Stevenson's going to find himself in trouble. Because if you look at Stevenson, even when he fought Thomas Williams Jr., after the first couple rounds of Williams Jr. coming at him, Stevenson dispensed with the long-range boxing because he was getting caught at long range by a guy coming forward with a high guard. He dispensed with the long-range boxing and he started slugging it out with Thomas Williams Jr. on the inside. Thomas Williams Jr. is not as good technically as a Badou Jack. He's not as good defensively as a Badou Jack. So he got taken out by Stevenson when they were slugging out on the inside. I don't think Badou Jack is going to be as vulnerable as Thomas Williams Jr. up close against Adonis Stevenson. I actually think he's going to have the advantage up close against Stevenson. Now, Stevenson can fight on the inside. Don't get it twisted. He can, but he prefers not to. And he is quite vulnerable on the inside. Even though he can fight, he can get good shots off, uppercuts and body shots and whatnot with both hands. Defensively, he's a lot more vulnerable up close than he tends to be at long range, where he can use his legs and slip and slide and get away from shots. So, yeah, the longer fights go, the more difficult Stevenson seems to find it to keep opponents off him. If you look at the first Fonfara fight, another good example. The first Fonfara fight, Stevenson was keeping him at long range. But as the fight progressed, Fonfara started getting closer and closer and closer to the point where he even dropped Adonis Stevenson in that fight. So, yeah, I think Stevenson is vulnerable in the second half of fights as he slows down and opponents get closer to him. And again, even in the Fonfara fight, he did slug it out on the inside with Fonfara and did get the better of it. But again, I think Badou Jack is defensively much better than Fonfara, defensively much better than Thomas Williams Jr. on the inside and on the outside. So I don't see Stevenson having all his own way on the inside with Badou Jack at all like he did with the other guys. The one scenario where Adonis Stevenson could win this fight late or could win on points is if he manages to hurt Badou Jack early. And he has hurt a lot of guys early and kept them in their place. That has happened. So if he's able to hurt Jack early or drop him and intimidate him, that's the key. It's not just dropping him, because James DeGale dropped Badou Jack early, but James DeGale didn't intimidate Badou Jack with his punching power. It was more of a balanced shot and a flash knockdown that got Badou Jack against James DeGale in the first round. Okay, so he wasn't intimidated and he continued to march forward after that. Stevenson has to intimidate Badou Jack early if he's going to win the fight on points. If he ain't going to take the guy out, he's got to intimidate him and keep him in his shell. Can he do that? I think he's got a pretty good chance of doing it, but I don't know whether he will. That's what makes this fight so intriguing. That's why I'm looking forward to this fight so much, because it's almost 50-50 the way I see it. Stevenson has the punching power, and as I say, I do think he's the more talented fighter. But at 40 years old, can he still do it at this level against a guy like Badou Jack, who has been fighting top quality opposition and has been more active? These are the questions. And people might say Badou Jack is coming up from super middleweight. Stevenson also came up from super middleweight earlier on in his career. And if anything, Stevenson actually might be, if not the same size as Badou Jack, maybe even a little smaller. I know he's shorter than Badou Jack. I'm not sure who has the longer arms. I suspect Stevenson, because he has ridiculously long arms for his height. And he uses them very, very well, by the way. He uses that arm length to his advantage in virtually every fight he has. Certainly since hooking up with Manny Stewart and now Manny Stewart's nephew, Javon Sugar Hill. So, yeah, I'm intrigued by this fight. As far as I can see in the article where I'm getting this information from, a date hasn't been set yet, but we can expect an announcement hopefully within the next few weeks. So drop your comments in the comment section below and let me know what you think about this fight and who you think is going to win this fight. And as I say, I'll do a separate video about the Alida Alvarez-Alexander Vodcek fight. All right. Now, actually, in this article, they're talking about it'll be interesting to see what happens in terms of which television network shows the fight, because Vodcek is promoted by Top Rank, and Top Rank fights are normally on ESPN. Whereas Stevenson normally fights on Showtime, and Badou Jack normally fights on Showtime. So will the Vodcek Alida Alvarez fight be a co-feature or an undercard of Stevenson versus Jack on Showtime? Or would there be some kind of purse bid situation where these two fights end up on different networks. Who knows? It's all going to be interesting to find out. But yeah, let me know what you think about Adonis Stevenson versus Badou Jack. How do you see the fight going? Who do you see winning? Drop it all in the comment section below. It's Hatman, I'm out.